or subtract integers. So let's look at our do now. A cyclist travels downhill for 125 feet. Then she travels up a hill 50 feet. Write an addition expression to describe each situation, then determine the sum. So downhill means to write it as an integer is a negative whole number. Then she travels up a hill as a positive whole number. It says write an addition expression. Let's say she went down, so let's imagine, here's land. She went down a hill 125, and then she went up 50. So she's still below her starting point. So there are more negatives. How many more negatives are there than positive? If you subtract it, it'd be negative 75 feet is the answer. I could have drawn 125 negatives, then 50 positives, and then cancel, make some zero pairs. I would have 75 negatives left. I subtract integers. Yellow represents yellow positive integers. Red represents negative integers. When you put a yellow and a red together, it is called a zero pair. A zero pair means the positive and negative cancel out. So let's start with our very first example. You have 5 positives. You're going to subtract. Another word for subtract is minus, but we're going to use the word as take away. You are going to take away 4 of the positives. What do you have left? 1 positive. 5 minus 4 is 1 positive. Before you say, oh my God, that's like pre-K. Yeah, we're starting easy. Negatives now. You start with 4 negatives. You subtract was another word for subtract, take away. You're going to take away 2 of the negatives. What do you have left? Negative 2. So let's try some examples now. I start with 5 negatives. Start with 5 negatives. It says take away, subtract means take away, 5 negatives. What do you have left? 0. Another way to see it is this way. You start with 5 negatives. We're not going to go there yet. All right, let's do 8 minus 2 is 6. We're going to notice that the subtraction expression and this addition expression is equivalent. In 2 slides from now, you're going to see why. So let's start at the next one. You have 7 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Subtract or take away 5 of the negatives. What do you have left? Negative 2. This one, yeah. Next one. You have 3 negatives. You start with 3 negatives. 1, 2, 3. They want you to subtract or take away 2 of the negatives. So what do you have as the answer? 1. We're going to learn very shortly a subtraction and addition expression can be equivalent. Now let's get to the harder stuff now. This is where kids get confused, way confused. You start with 3 negatives. They want you to subtract or take away 2, a positive or negative? Positive. Take away 2 positive. Oh, there aren't any positive. Before you say it's impossible, you can't solve, that's incorrect. What if I put a positive here and a positive here? Will it change its value? Think about it. I start with negative 3, but if I add 2 positive, these cancel out. Now the value is negative 1. So how can I add 2 positive without changing its value? And earlier I said something about zero pair. If I put a positive here and I put a negative, I put a positive and a negative, these are zero pair. They cancel out. What do you have left? Negative 3. So negative 3, they want you to take away 2 positive. So let's see. So we started off with 3 negatives. Then we came up with 2 negatives. The answer is negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So negative 3 minus 2 is equivalent to negative 3 plus negative 2 equals negative 5. Let's try some more examples. We start with 6 positive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They would like you to subtract or take away 2 negatives. But there aren't any negatives to take away from it. So how can I add, there's a reason why I'm saying that word, add 2 negatives without changing its value? Zero pairs. So they said take away now 2 negatives. So I started with 6. I added 2 positive. 6 plus 2 is 8. Do you see how 6 plus 2, the addition expression, is equivalent to 6 minus negative 2, subtraction expression? How do you come up with this addition expression? Hopefully you can figure out. So as you can tell, I start with 6. I'm adding 2, which is the opposite, seems like, of negative 2. Let's keep going. I have negative 2. I need to take away 4 negatives. Do you have enough negatives to take away? No. So I have 4 negatives. But you just cannot add 4 negatives without changing its starting value. So what do? 0 pairs. So I now take away the 4 negatives. I started with 2 negatives. I'm adding 4 positive. Negative 2 plus 4 is 2. There is the addition expression. So how do you come up with a subtraction expression to an addition expression? It seems like I started with negative 2. I added a 4. Here's negative 4. It seems like 4 is the opposite of negative 4. It seems like I added the opposite. Let's try our last example. I started with negative 3. It says I need to subtract or take away 5 negatives. But again, you cannot just take away 5 negatives. How can I add 5 negatives without changing its starting value of negative 3? I draw 0 pairs. So now I take away 5 negatives. Initially, I started with negative 3. I'm adding 5 positive, and there's the addition expression. So negative 3 plus 5 is 2. So what do you know? I started with negative 3. You're adding 5. 5 is the opposite of negative 5. So what we're going to talk about subtracting integer is adding the opposite. So add opposite. So you start with your initial number. Then you change the subtraction sign to addition. Did I do that? Subtraction sign to addition. Then you change the sign of the second number, which in other words do the opposite of the second numbers. Opposite negative 5 is 5. So let's see if this really does work. Negative 1, add the opposite. Change that to adding. Opposite of 4 is negative 4. Let's prove it, that these are equivalent. I start with negative 1. I need to take away 4 positive. Again, how do you add 4 positive without changing its value? It's called 0 pair. Now I take away 4 positives. So I started with negative 1. I'm adding 4 negatives. Negative 1 plus negative 4 is negative 5. So it does work. Add the opposite. Let's do the next one. I started with negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need to take away 6 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, you cannot add 6 negatives just like that. You have to do it without changing its initial value of negative 5. So you do 0 pairs. So now I take away 6 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What am I left with? I started with negative 5. I added 6 positive. Negative 5 plus 6 equals 1. And does it work? Start with negative 5. Change that to it. Adding. Opposite of negative 6 is 6. That is the reason why we add the opposite. So this is the proof. This is showing you why. So if you have a model, and then you add the opposite, you will come up with how to subtract integers. Add the opposite.